I spent 18 months building something the world had never seen before. A cybersecurity system that could predict and neutralize attacks before they even started. Not react, not defend, but anticipate, intercept, neutralize. It was the kind of breakthrough that could change everything I poured my life into it. 80-hour work weeks, missed holidays, sleepless nights spent chasing ideas that danced just beyond my reach, all for one dream. One belief, that I could create something that would not just protect systems, but protect people. When Orion Systems approached me, it felt like destiny. They promised innovation, resources, freedom. Victor Grant, the CEO, stood in front of me that day, smiling like a man who believed in dreams. He looked me in the eye and said, "Here, Natalie, your vision can finally come to life." I believed him, I trusted him, I was wrong. Because the very moment Sentinel Shield was ready, the very moment it reached the threshold of changing the world, Victor made his move. He fired me, tried to steal everything I had built, tried to erase my name from the very thing I had sacrificed everything to create. But what Victor did not know was that 6 months earlier I had seen this coming, and I had laid a trap he would never see, a trap that would bring everything crashing down around him. Before we dive into how I turned the tables, I want to ask you something. What would you have done? Would you have fought back, walked away? Or would you have built a defense even stronger than your attackers? Leave your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe in fighting for what you build, stay with me. Because this is not just a story about betrayal. It is a story about resilience, about strategy, and about how sometimes the best revenge is simply surviving and thriving. My name is Natalie Chen. I am 29 years old, born and raised in San Francisco, California. My parents were both engineers, logical thinkers, methodical planners. From the time I could hold a pencil, I was taught to solve problems, to see patterns where others saw chaos. School came easy, too easy. By the time I graduated high school, I had already built my first machine learning model. Not because anyone told me to, but because I could not stop myself from asking, what if Stanford was the natural choice? I majored in computer science and minored in philosophy. Because even back then, I knew that building powerful systems without ethics was like handing a sword to a child. After college, I climbed fast. Microsoft recruited me straight out of graduation. I had a 6-figure salary before I could legally rent a car. A sleek apartment overlooking the Bay Stock Options Prestige. From the outside, it looked like I had won the game, but inside, something was missing. It was not about the money. It was never about the money. It was about impact. It was about building something that mattered late at night. Long after meetings ended and emails quieted, I would stay up scribbling ideas in a battered notebook, sketching out an architecture for a security system that could adapt, learn, and protect before threats even emerged. A system that could defend without needing to be told. A system that could think for itself. That dream became Sentinel Shield for months. I nurtured it like a secret flame, tweaking designs, writing prototypes on my own time, testing theories no corporate project manager would have ever approved. I knew I was onto something big. But I also knew that to truly bring Sentinel Shield to life, I would need resources. Time, a company willing to bet on an idea too risky, too unproven for any Fortune 500. That was when Orion Systems entered the picture, a fast-rising startup known for bold ideas, aggressive innovation, and leadership that claimed to believe in empowering their talent. Victor Grant, the CEO, reached out to me personally. His reputation preceded him, a brilliant strategist, a visionary, someone who could charm venture capitalists out of millions with a single pitch. We met at a small coffee shop downtown. No suits, no power plays, just two people talking about the future. He listened, really listened, asked questions that made me feel seen, valued, understood. When I told him about Sentinel Shield, his eyes lit up. He leaned across the table, lowered his voice, and said, "Natalie, you are sitting on something that could change the world. Come build it with us. We will give you everything you need and stay out of your way." It sounded too good to be true. Maybe deep down I knew it was. But after years of playing it safe, I was ready to take the leap. I resigned from Microsoft, walked away from the safety net, signed the paperwork with Orion Systems, and I stepped into what I believed would be the most exhilarating chapter of my life. I was not naive. At least I thought I wasn't. I knew startups were risky. I knew big promises often came with big strings attached. But Victor seemed different. He seemed like someone who wanted to build something real. So I packed up my life, put Sentinel Shield at the center of my universe, and dove in headfirst. For the first time in a long time, I felt alive. And for the first time, I believed I was exactly where I was meant to be. If only I had known I was walking straight into a beautifully decorated cage, one designed not to set me free, but to trap me. The first few months at Orion Systems were everything Victor had promised, and more. I was given my own lab space. A clean sunlit room lined with glass walls and state-of-the-art equipment. I assembled a small but brilliant team, handpicked from the best minds I knew, people who, like me, wanted to build something that had never been built before. Every morning felt electric. I would arrive before sunrise, fueled by strong coffee and even stronger ambition, and dive headfirst into Sentinel Shield's codebase. It was intoxicating, watching lines of code take shape, watching algorithms begin to anticipate, adapt, and evolve beyond anything traditional cybersecurity had ever achieved. Victor would stop by sometimes, always at odd hours, always with that same polished smile. He would compliment the team, ask questions just detailed enough to seem interested, but never so deep that he risked exposing what he did not know. At first, I welcomed his visits. His attention felt like validation, proof that what we were building mattered at the highest levels. But over time, small things began to gnaw at me. He would ask for progress reports unusually often, request early-stage demos that, frankly, no CEO would normally bother with. He insisted on being copied on every critical system architecture update. And sometimes, late at night, I would find signs that someone had accessed our internal server logs, footprints left behind by someone who knew just enough to poke around but not enough to cover their tracks completely. I told myself it was paranoia, that startups moved fast, that founders had a right to stay informed. After all, Victor had given me everything, hadn't he? Besides, Sentinel Shield was growing faster than I had ever dreamed. Within a year, it could not just detect known malware signatures. It could recognize behavior patterns before an attack even launched. We simulated dozens of real-world cyber attacks. Sentinel Shield intercepted every single one without a single human intervention. It was working, and not just working, evolving, adapting, learning. The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday evening, in a moment that still feels surreal when I replay it in my mind. We launched a full-scale penetration test, throwing everything we had at Sentinel Shield: sophisticated malware, zero-day exploits, multi-layered phishing attacks. Not only did it repel every threat it detected and neutralized a brand new vulnerability, we had not even coded for something no one had told it to find, something no human had explicitly programmed. Sentinel Shield had learned to protect against threats even its creators had not imagined. I remember staring at the screen in stunned silence, feeling my heart hammering against my ribs. This was it. This was the moment I was standing on the edge of something revolutionary, and it was mine. Without hesitating, I scheduled a meeting with Victor for the next afternoon. I wanted to show him what we had achieved. I wanted him to see that all the late nights, all the sacrifices, had not been in vain. I thought he would be thrilled, that he would recognize the magnitude of what we had built. I thought he would celebrate with me. I was wrong. When I walked into Victor's office the next day, something was off immediately. The room felt colder. The blinds were drawn, the lights dimmed low. Victor sat behind his massive mahogany desk, expression unreadable, and sitting beside him, quietly flipping through a thick file folder, was Andrea Monroe, the company's lead legal counsel. The sight of her sent a ripple of unease down my spine. Still, I told myself maybe it was just a formality. Maybe they were here to discuss patents, licensing next steps. Maybe I sat down clutching my laptop like a shield. Victor smiled, but it was not the warm, collaborative smile I had come to know. It was something else, something colder, sharper. "Before we get to your presentation," he said, voice silky, smooth, "we need to address a few contractual matters." He slid a document across the table toward me. I glanced down dense paragraphs, legal language, clauses and subclauses that blurred together. Andrea spoke, her tone flat and rehearsed, Per Section 14(3) of your employment agreement, any intellectual property developed using Orion Systems resources belongs solely to Orion Systems. I froze for a heartbeat. The world tilted sideways. The walls of the office seemed to pulse. No, I said slowly. Sentinel Shield was conceptualized before I ever signed with Orion. I have documentation, time-stamped prototypes, emails. Andrea barely blinked. Regardless, she said coolly. The fully functional version was developed on company time using company infrastructure, which makes it Orion Systems property. Victor leaned forward, then hands clasped loosely together, watching me the way a cat watches a cornered bird. The board agrees, he said. You'll be compensated. Of course, a one-time bonus of $300,000. He said it like he was offering me a prize, like I should be grateful. $300,000 for 18 months of work, for a system worth billions, for a future I had bled to build. I felt my hands tighten into fists, felt the betrayal sear itself into my skin. Victor's voice was almost gentle now. Effective. Immediately, we are transitioning you out. Security will escort you to clear out your desk. He smiled again. That same polished, predatory smile. I hope there are no hard feelings. I sat there for a long, long moment. Frozen, silent, and in that silence, something inside me crystallized. Not panic, not defeat, resolve. Because while Victor thought he had trapped me, he had no idea that I had been setting my own defenses all along. As security waited outside the door as the lawyers shifted their papers, I closed my laptop, I stood up, and I smiled. Because Victor might have thought he was ending my story, but he was only setting the stage for the real beginning. Security escorted me back to my lab, their faces a careful mask of professionalism, their bodies positioned just close enough to remind me I was no longer trusted here. They watched as I packed my things into a plain cardboard box, a few personal photos, a battered coffee mug, the notebooks filled with early sketches of Sentinel Shield, most of which they insisted on inspecting before I was allowed to take them. I moved slowly, deliberately, fighting to keep my face blank, neutral, because inside my mind was already racing, running simulations, projecting outcomes. Victor thought he had beaten me, but he had made a fatal mistake. He underestimated me. 6 months ago, I noticed something strange on Sentinel Shield's development logs, a series of late-night access attempts, someone poking around the back end without authorization. At first, I thought it was an external breach, some hacker trying to penetrate our early builds. But when I traced the access points, my stomach turned. It was internal, someone inside Orion Systems, and not just anyone. The IP addresses were tied to Victor's private office. The discovery shook me. For days I wrestled with it. Should I confront him? Should I report it? Or should I prepare? In the end, instinct won. I began embedding quiet protections into Sentinel Shield's core. Not traps designed to destroy, but safeguards designed to protect from everyone, even from Orion Systems itself. At the surface level, Sentinel Shield looked pristine, efficient, flawless. But buried deeper, there were layers Victor would never see coming. The system was trained not just to detect outside threats, but internal ones as well. It watched. It learned. It recorded every unauthorized login, every unauthorized file transfer, every attempt to manipulate its codebase, all neatly compiled, all quietly encrypted, all waiting, not for revenge, but for justice. I did not plan to use it, not unless I had to. I wanted to believe Victor would honor his promises, that he would recognize the value of partnership, that he would not betray the very innovation he claimed to champion. But now, as I walked out of Orion Systems with a cardboard box in my arms, I knew exactly where we stood. Victor had chosen his path, and so had I. I reached my car in the parking garage, set the box carefully on the passenger seat, and closed the door. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the concrete wall ahead. Listening to the hum of fluorescent lights overhead, I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. The temptation to cry, to rage, to let the betrayal consume me, but I did not. Instead, I took a deep breath and I smiled. Because while Victor thought he was preparing to parade Sentinel Shield in front of his investors, he had no idea that the system he was about to showcase no longer answered to him. 10 minutes into tomorrow's big demo, everything he had stolen, everything he had claimed as his own, would reveal the truth. Not through sabotage, but through simple, unfiltered fact. Sentinel Shield would do exactly what it had been designed to do: protect itself, expose the threat, and in the process, liberate its creator. I pulled out my phone and sent a single encrypted command to Sentinel Shield's monitoring protocol: activate passive watch mode. The system responded instantly. Command received authentication, confirmed, monitoring active. I set the phone down, started the engine, and drove away without looking back. Tomorrow, Victor Grant would learn a lesson the hard way. You can steal a product, you can steal a name, you can even steal a future, but you cannot steal a soul. And Sentinel Shield, like its creator, was built with a soul that refused to be broken. That night, my apartment felt strangely quiet. The city buzzed outside my window as if mocking the silence I carried inside. Most people, after losing everything they had worked for, might have curled up on the couch, might have cried, might have drowned themselves in anger or despair. But I had no time for grief, because tomorrow everything would be set into motion. I ordered takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant, put on a mindless sitcom in the background, and sat at my kitchen table laptop. Opened Sentinel Shield's monitoring feed, blinking steadily in the corner of my screen. No panic, no second guessing, just preparation. Because long before Victor's betrayal was official, I had started preparing for this exact moment. 6 months ago, when I discovered Victor's unauthorized access, I made a choice. I did not confront him. I did not report him. Instead, I started building layers of protection, layers of quiet retaliation. I had modified the demo file, the same one Victor would proudly present to investors, embedding a hidden protocol. Nothing destructive, nothing illegal, just honest. 10 minutes into the live demo, the system would trigger. Passive deep scan mode, and Sentinel Shield, doing exactly what it was trained to do, would start analyzing Orion Systems' internal network. Not just the demo environment, but every connected system, every unauthorized file copy, every unapproved server access, every internal policy violation. It would surface everything Victor had hoped to bury in real time, right in front of the investors. But that was only the first layer. The second layer was even more elegant. For the past several months, Sentinel Shield had been quietly compiling a dossier, a growing encrypted archive of all suspicious activities within Orion Systems. It had been recording keystrokes, access logs, document changes, all time-stamped, all unalterable, all sealed behind encryption, accessible only through my personal biometric key. It was not sabotage. It was transparency. If Victor tried to paint me as malicious, the logs would tell the true story. In cold, indisputable data, I had not just built a defense, I had built a truth engine, and it was already humming quietly to life, ready to reveal everything. As the clock ticked toward midnight, I leaned back in my chair, letting the tension seep from my muscles. I had done everything I could. Now all that was left was to wait. At exactly 9:30 p.m., my phone buzzed against the table, Rachel, Victor's assistant. I picked up on the third ring. She did not bother with pleasantries. "Victor needs to see you," she said. Voice tight, I glanced at the clock. It was almost 10 o'clock at night. "He says it's urgent. A car is already on its way." I smiled faintly to myself. Right on schedule. 40 minutes later, I was walking through the dim, deserted halls of Orion Systems, escorted by a security guard who kept darting nervous glances at me as if afraid I might explode at any second. We stopped outside the conference room. The guard knocked once, opened the door, and ushered me inside. Victor was already there, and he looked ruined. His jacket was off, his tie was loose, his hair was a mess of frustrated hands. He was pacing when I entered, but when he saw me, he stopped dead. "Fix it," he snapped immediately. I tilted my head slightly, feigning polite confusion. "Fix what exactly?" He stalked toward me, waving a sheaf of printed reports. The system Sentinel Shield crashed the test environment. It is flagging internal components as threats, generating thousands of false positives. I let a small smile flicker at the corner of my mouth. "Sounds like the system is working as designed," I said smoothly. He slammed the papers down on the table between us, sending a few flying off the edge. "This is not funny, Natalie. We have 12 major investors flying in tomorrow. $75 million in commitments riding on this demo. Your investors, I corrected softly. Your commitments. He stared at me, chest heaving. For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost, he took a deep, shaky breath, forcing his voice into a more conciliatory tone. Perhaps we were hasty yesterday. He said we are willing to renegotiate, a better compensation package, maybe even some equity. I crossed my arms over my chest. And what exactly do you think happened during the test run, Victor? He hesitated. Then grudgingly he admitted, the system turned inward. It started identifying Orion systems itself as a security threat. It generated hundreds of internal breach reports. It exposed everything. I nodded slowly, exactly as designed. He stared at me, realization dawning, and with it true fear. You trained it to do this, he said hoarsely. No, I corrected gently. I trained it to recognize threats wherever they came from. Victor sagged into a chair, defeated for the first time since I had met him. What do you want? He asked finally. And there it was. The question I had been waiting for. I sat down across from Victor, taking my time, feeling no need to rush. For once the power was mine. I folded my hands neatly on the polished table. I kept my voice even, measured. Here are my terms. I said, full recognition as Sentinel Shield's sole creator and lead architect. 50% ownership of all patents and intellectual property. A permanent seat on Orion Systems' board of directors, overseeing all ethical implementation. And $10 million in compensation. Victor's jaw tightened. I watched the muscles work as he ground his teeth. That's blackmail, he hissed. No, I said calmly. That's negotiation. He shoved back his chair, pacing again, his shoes scuffing angrily against the carpet. If I refuse, he demanded. I shrugged lightly. Then Sentinel Shield remains as it is, flagging internal threats, crashing your investor demo tomorrow, rendering your company toxic in the eyes of every serious backer. I leaned forward, letting him see the steel in my gaze. And the internal reports, the ones Sentinel Shield compiled, every unauthorized access, every copied file, every violation of your own security protocols, they will find their way to the appropriate regulatory bodies. Victor stopped pacing. He stared at me, breathing heavily. You would destroy everything, he said. Voice low, I smiled thinly. No, Victor. You already did that. I'm just giving you a choice in how the ashes fall. For a long, agonizing moment, he said nothing, just stared at the floor, fists clenching and unclenching. Finally, with a sound that was half growl, half sigh, he slumped back into his chair. Fine, he muttered. You win. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small flash drive. I placed it gently on the table between us. This, I said, is a patch that will restore Sentinel Shield's demo mode for tomorrow. It will bypass the internal threat protocols for 48 hours, enough time to secure your funding and to finalize our new agreement. He glared at me, his eyes burning with resentment. And if I try anything, he asked. I shrugged again. The original encrypted logs are backed up off-site. Multiple locations, multiple triggers. I let the words sink in. You can't erase this, Victor. You can't outmaneuver it. You can either adapt or collapse. Slowly he reached for the flash drive. His hand trembled slightly as he closed his fingers around it. You planned this all along, he muttered bitterly. I rose to my feet, slinging my bag over my shoulder. No, I said softly. I just planned for the possibility. The same way Sentinel Shield was designed to. As I turned to leave, he called after me. How did you know? His voice cracked with a mixture of anger and disbelief. How did you know I would try to cut you out? I paused at the door, looked back at him. I didn't, I said simply. But Sentinel Shield did. It was built to recognize patterns, to predict threats before they emerged. I gave him a small, almost pitying smile. Maybe some of that rubbed off on its creator. Then I walked away, leaving him alone with his crumbling kingdom. The next morning, I returned to Orion Systems. Not as an employee, not as a subordinate, but as a partner and equal. Victor introduced me to the investors with a smile so brittle I thought it might shatter on the floor. The demo went flawlessly. Sentinel Shield dazzled them, anticipating, neutralizing, defending with elegant precision. Questions flew. How had we built something so advanced? What inspired its creation? Victor hesitated for just a fraction of a second, And then with a look that was half defeat, half forced pride, he said, "It was Natalie's brainchild, her vision from the beginning. Orion Systems simply gave it a home." The investors clapped. They shook my hand. They bombarded me with technical questions. I answered with ease. For the first time in months, I felt the weight lift from my chest. Not just because I had survived, but because I had won cleanly strategically, without destroying everything I had built. 3 months later, Sentinel Shield was deployed commercially for the first time. It thwarted a major cyber attack targeting a global financial institution, an attack that could have cost over $300 million in damages. Instead, the breach was stopped cold, and Sentinel Shield became the gold standard for predictive cybersecurity. Victor and I continued to work together at arm's length. Strictly professional, we would never be friends. We would never trust each other again, but we did not need to. Because the power balance had shifted forever, and this time it would never shift back. Looking back now sometimes, I wonder how close I came to losing everything. One wrong move, one misstep, one moment of panic, and Victor might have succeeded. He might have walked away with Sentinel Shield, with my life's work, with my future. But he didn't. Because I learned something that no textbook, no university, no corporation had ever taught me. You cannot trust that others will protect what you build. You have to build protections yourself. Not out of bitterness, not out of paranoia, but out of wisdom. Because betrayal does not always come from the outside. Sometimes it comes smiling, wearing a tailored suit, speaking words of encouragement, promising you the world while planning to take everything the moment you turn your back. I built Sentinel Shield to recognize those threats, and in doing so, I learned to recognize them in my own life, too. Today, Sentinel Shield protects networks all over the world, banks, hospitals, critical infrastructure. But even more importantly, every version deployed includes mandatory ethical guardrails, transparent protocols, external audits, fail-safes designed to prevent anyone from twisting it into something corrupt. Because technology is only as ethical as the people who control it. And after what happened at Orion Systems, I made a vow. Never again would I allow something I built to be used against others. Never again would I allow power to outweigh principle. Victor taught me that not through words, but through his actions. And for that, strangely enough, I am grateful. Because Sentinel Shield is not just a cybersecurity system. It is a philosophy, a way of seeing the world. It is about vigilance, about protection, about resilience, and about never forgetting that the greatest threats often come from where you least expect them. A few months ago, we celebrated Sentinel Shield's public offering. The company was valued at over $4 billion. At the celebration event, a young developer approached me wide-eyed, clutching a notepad filled with questions. "What's the secret?" she asked breathlessly. "How do you build something that powerful, that unbreakable?" I smiled at her, remembering the girl I used to be, the one who thought brilliance was enough to protect her work, the one who thought good intentions would be enough to shield her from betrayal. I leaned down slightly, lowered my voice, and said, "It is not just about building great code. It is about building great defenses, not just in your systems, but in yourself." She nodded thoughtfully, scribbling furiously, and as I walked away, my phone buzzed softly in my pocket. Another quiet notification from Sentinel Shield System Integrity Secured Threats, Neutralized Creator Protections, Active. I smiled to myself. It was working. Still learning, still defending. Just as it was always meant to. Just as I had learned to defend myself. Because in the end, the real lesson was not just about cybersecurity. It was about life. Protect what you build. Honor your vision. And never ever let anyone steal your future from you, no matter how powerful they seem. Because sometimes, the greatest act of revenge is simply surviving and thriving on your own terms. What about you? If you were in my place, standing on the edge of everything you had worked for, watching it being stolen by someone you once trusted, what would you have done? Would you have walked away quietly? Would you have fought through the courts? Would you have built your own silent defense and waited for the right moment to strike? I want to hear your story. Because the truth is, betrayal is something many of us face in business and friendships, even within our own families. And how we respond to it defines not just what happens next, but who we become. For me, the choice was simple, even if it wasn't easy. Protect what I built. stand my ground, rewrite the ending of my story on my own terms. If there is one thing I hope you take away from this, it is this. You are your own first line of defense in your career, in your dreams, in your life. Never hand that power over to someone else without building your own safeguards first. Not because you expect betrayal, but because you deserve protection. Because what you create, what you build, what you believe in, is worth defending. Always, so tell me. Have you ever been betrayed? Stolen from, underestimated, if you have? I want you to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters. Your experience could empower someone else standing at the edge of their own battle. And if you believe in protecting what you build and fighting for your future, in never letting anyone else write your ending, make sure you subscribe to EN True Tales. We share powerful stories here. Stories of betrayal, of resilience, of standing tall when the world tries to knock you down. Stories like yours, and maybe just, maybe, your story will be the one that inspires someone else to fight back too. Stay strong, stay sharp, and above all, stay true to what you build. Always.